welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have with us Mr. J. Maymi to join us today with this conversation. But before we get into the conversation, I'll just share a little bit about Mr. Maymi. He is a national syndicate radio talk show host. He's 10-time author, and he's also a sales psychologist. I will have him share more with you before we get into the conversation. Mr. Maymi, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Hey, Richard, it's an honor to be on your program, brother. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, man. Yes, before we start, I want you to share, if you don't mind, with the listeners, something about you so they can get an idea of who you are, and so we can dive into the questions.
Well, I am a byproduct of actually adoptive parents. I have a twin brother. We both were adopted back in the early 1970s, actually 1969. And we grew up in a very difficult place called Spanish Harlem, El Barrio, as people from New York would call it. And we didn't have a lot of financial opportunities. It was meager means. My father worked 3 jobs. My mother worked a job until she adopted us, and then she stayed home to take care of her 2 twins. And the upbringing was very difficult, brother. When you come from meager means and you have a Puerto Rican family that moves here from Puerto Rico, they don't really speak the language. It's difficult enough for them. So growing up in the 70s in an area where you could have easily found yourself doing a lot of wrong things just for the survival means was a challenge. But thankfully, we had the good parents and the opportunity to find the right things to do to keep us on the straight and narrow. And I think the best thing for me, I'll be honest with you, that could have happened was the realization that you could make anything of yourself regardless of your circumstances, right? It's what you decide to focus on, is the decisions you make that are going to impact the rest of your life. And for me, one of those decisions was, believe it or not, something that probably off the wall, was the fact that when I played baseball at Central Park, I found myself realizing that all of these individuals that were there over the weekends, all of these people, Richard, that were in Central Park on the weekends, were walking by what me and my brother saw as financial opportunities, but they were just in the shape of a bottle and a can. Because really, we didn't see a bottle and a can. We saw a nickel. We saw 5 cents, because you could trade those bottles and cans in for a nickel, and you could still do it today, right?
Yep.
But all these people, all they saw was trash. Me and my brother saw cash. But what happened there, that was a turning point in my life where I began to recognize that it's all in how you see things. It's all in your perception of opportunity and what opportunity could look like for you, because you could see trash or you could see cash. We saw cash. We turned that weekend visits to the park as a way to develop our entrepreneurial spirit. And ever since then, brother, I've been living that entrepreneurial life in multiple expressions, from a winning author to a top radio talk show host to recently an award-winning sales subscription-based, online-based program, to a financial services company, to a number of different ways that over the course of my lifetime, I've developed this entrepreneurial spirit to continue to help people in multiple ways.
Man, that's awesome. Especially listening for your story, starting from where you started to where you are right now. But I see where the sales psychologist comes in. It started back then. So
Absolutely.
that's great. I did pick that up. Being a sales psychologist, you have to understand. You have to see things that some people may not see as an opportunity and turn it into cash, of course, but be able to sell that thing to people that some people may overlook. Man, so that's great. And we may touch back, well, not may, we're going to touch back on some parts of your journey in regards to the questions that I'm going to be asking and stuff like that. So again, thanks for being here.
My pleasure, brother. And let's give the folks a real good opportunity to understand how they can thrive with your program.
Okay, yes. So that's what the focus is. So my first question to you, what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
It really is a mindset of a decision, number one, that you're going to make your life worthy or an example to others. Let me give an example of that. This is a real life. We're actually this is real time example of what I'm sharing with you, and that's a great question, by the way. So yesterday, as of this recording, the day prior, I was back on the bodybuilding stage. I haven't competed in bodybuilding, Richard, in 27 years. The last time I competed, I was 25 years old,
Wow.
and I had won many championships back then, all natural bodybuilding. And when I left that stage 27 years ago, I knew that I would come back and I would come back to compete in the master's class, which is over 50. I'm 52 years old. And I've never lost sight of that, never gave that dream away. I never let it get the best of me. So for all those years, I stayed in the hunt to get back on that stage, but not for the glory of the stage, but to show my kids and my fans and my family and those that are close to me that if you hold tight on to a decision that you're going to stick to, it doesn't matter whether that decision comes to pass in a month, 2 months, or in this case 27 years. I made a personal commitment, a personal decision that one day I would come back to show my kids that anything is possible. That it doesn't matter where you are in life, it doesn't matter what's going on around you. And this year for me has been a tumultuous year with all sorts of things that could have easily given me a reason to say, well, I'll put this competition off for another year. I don't have time to train and diet and do 2-a-day sessions. I don't have time for that stuff. And, that's what it takes when you're competing. But I said, you know what better time to show my kids, my family, my friends, my contacts than when it is the most difficult time to embark on a challenge. Not when it's easy, because things are not always going to be easy. And if they were easy, they wouldn't be called a challenge, right? Uh, and I did that. I competed yesterday. My kids were in the audience. People were on Facebook looking at it, and we went live, and I ended up winning the whole show, Richard.
Man, that's
I took the whole
congratulations,
show.
man.
Thank you, brother.
Congratulations. Yes,
Right?
sir.
But the point of that, and my son was so proud. My 13-year-old son, he was so giddy and proud, and he couldn't believe, oh my God, my daddy was number one. My daddy was number one, and at that moment, I realized that the power of your commitment, when you decide you're going to make an impact in the life of somebody else, that somebody else could be your very own family, or it could be some strangers that you'll never meet ever. But you have to make a decision that in one shape, one form or another, doesn't matter what that shape or form is, doesn't matter what that experience is, that you're going to leave behind a footprint that people will know that you were there. Yesterday's win, I left a footprint in my kids, my family's life, that it doesn't matter if you're 25 or 52.
That's
If
right.
you make a decision to do something to impact others, there's never an age that it matters whether you do it or not. Is that you make a commitment and you stick to it and you do it and you leave that legacy behind.
Man, and I that's really important, especially when we're talking about positive impact. As I said, can be close to you or some strangers, but making that commitment that you're going to do it, and for you to leave that competition, bodybuilding for 27 years to come back, that shows it didn't just start yesterday or last month that you're staying, because you have to stay in shape for over 27 years. You still have
That's
to work
right.
out, you still have to discipline yourself, even though you weren't competing. But that shows the level of commitment. And when you do it for yourself, you're automatically doing it for others. So making the commitment is really important, as you shared, when we're talking about making an impact. And the impact, again, as you said, it can be someone's close to us or a complete stranger. And we just have to be that example when we want to make a difference in the world. So I appreciate you sharing that story in itself. For 27 years, man, that shows commitment and dedication to yourself and to those people who are looking up to you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
sir. My next question is, what advice do you have for the men listening and how they can play a role in creating positive change?
Well, I think the advice is you've got to be real clear on your life first. And I want to make sure that the men understand this. It's impossible, and I don't like to use the word impossible sometimes often, but in this case, it's impossible to pour into the life of someone else when you've not filled up your cup first. in the clarity of your own direction. You're no good to somebody in terms of inspiring, encouraging, influencing, improving, impacting the life of somebody else. If not that your life has to be perfect, because none of us have perfect lives, but you have to have a handle on your own life. It cracks me up when I see teachers and preachers who aren't living to a modicum of life of what they're preaching and teaching. In other words, you can't preach and teach to lose weight and get in shape to somebody else, and you look like you've been having too many Happy Meals.
That's right.
Or you
Yes.
can't preach savings and getting your house in financial order, and you're a vagabond financially. You can't do that. You can't tell somebody else how to run a family or a marriage, and you are doing all sorts of screwy things on the side. You can't do that. So if you're going to make an impact, if you're going to have influence in the life of somebody else, you got to make sure that you are first clear on the kind of life you want to live and the kind of person you want to be. I just told again, I want to use my son as an example. He just turned 13 last week, and we had a big party for him. And I said to him that night he was doing some stuff he shouldn't have been doing, going on the computer, trying to sneak a game or two before he goes. So I had to go in his room and I said, Bud, we just celebrated you're 13 years old. Now you're a teenager. You're all excited about being a teenager. Well, teenagers don't behave in the way that 10, 11, and 12-year-olds do. So you got to decide who you're going to be. You're either going to be a teenager and begin to adapt more mature, responsible attitudes and disciplines as a teenager and be treated as one, or you want to just say you're a 13-year-old teenager by the title, but you still want to act like you're 10 years old, where I got to come in here and make sure you're not sneaking a game before when you're supposed to be in bed. You got to know who you're going to be before you can pour into the life of somebody else.
Well, and I think that's important when we're talking about creating positive change. Who you are is important. And as you shared some examples, we can't want a change over here and we refuse to make those changes ourselves. We have to develop that like self-discipline. We have to develop that focus, that clarity on who we want to be and the change we want to make and live according to those changes that would like
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
see within our sphere of influence. So
Absolutely, brother.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
I really appreciate that. So my next question is, how can we as Black men help to change the narrative today? And you can
Yeah.
choose
Mhm.
whichever aspect you want to focus on.
That's a great question. That's probably a question that we could spend an entire hour on, changing the narrative. I think you change the narrative externally and internally. And let me just answer that in a way that people can really grasp. There's plenty of people out there. If you're Latino, if you're Hispanic, you're Black, there's plenty of people who already pre-frame how you're going to react, how you're going to behave, how you're going to speak. The minute that somebody either sees your skin color or your nationality, they already are predisposed to how they think you're going to react. That's an external behavior. So you cannot reinforce what someone else is already thinking that you're going to behave like. So you have to temper your responses, especially to those who might think that you're going to act a certain way. Here's what I mean externally. People already in New York anyway, because Puerto Ricans are known well in New York, Florida. I know because I'm in the community. People already presume that the minute you say you're Hispanic, you're Latino, that you don't work on the weekends, you're sort of lazy, you're not a go-getter for the most part. Now, I can, by my actions, I can reinforce that predisposed image that people have by acting that way, or I can go and buck that and work hard, show people that no, I'm not who you think I am. I'm not going to speak wrongly. I'm not going to use bad English. I'm going to prove to you by my external behavior that I'm not who you think I am. I'm not going to reinforce to your community that you're right about me. I think a lot of us do that. And again, coming from the financial background, I'm going to try to expand this answer if I'm allowed, if it's okay with you, Rich.
Oh, that's fine.
Coming from the financial background and dealing in the Black community, when I sit down with lots of folks, oftentimes in the Black community, and I'm trying to teach and I'm trying to help them understand that, hey, it's about taking personal financial responsibility to save for your future, save for your children. You don't need to spend money on things that are not going to be helpful to you. Sometimes because of their environment, where what they see happening among their friends and family, most of these individuals and Latinos too, especially when you come from a poor background, and all you see is poverty, you accept poverty as a way of life. So you don't see past the weekend. You don't think about saving for generational wealth because you're concerned about what I got to buy this weekend and going out and spending money on all sorts of nonsense and foolishness. Well, that's a behavior that has to stop because all you're doing is reinforcing to the rest of the world that you are spenders and not savers. You don't have financial maturity. You don't have financial responsibility. And as those in Latino and the Black community, and I can say this because I'm in it, the financial community sees our community as a community not to waste their time on because we can't see past the weekend. So it infuriates me when I do speak with somebody, a young African couple, a young Black male. I'm trying to tell him, hey, you got to start putting some money away, and they don't do it because they're just too interested in spending it in the latest, greatest sneakers and things like that. That has to change. That's the external behavior. The internal behavior is how are you thinking about the value of your life? See, if you believe you're worthy of something greater than what your community, your environment, your friends and family tell you you are, then you're going to reflect that in your actions. But if you're still battling this invisible enemy of doubt, discouragement, disbelief that you're worthy, then your external actions are only going to show and reflect what you are dealing with on the inside. So you've got to deal with it externally and you got to deal with it internally.
That's a really good perspective because sometimes we may only focus on external. And
Hmm.
for external, how we respond to external stimuli and stuff like that starts from within. How we think within ourselves, the thoughts, the beliefs. So we have to address those internal dialogues or even conflicts so we can take care of the external. So I really appreciate that perspective because sometimes, again, we only focus on the external, how these things outside affecting us, not taking the time to look on, address the internal parts that may affect what we do externally. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Thank you.
My next question, yes, you're welcome. My next question is, how can, what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
A ton of people. Let me give you those folks. I've been influenced by people I've never met, and then I have been influenced by people that I have. I think it's okay to allow yourself to be influenced by people that you've never met, and chances are you never will meet. And who are these people? The people whose books I read. Some of the books, some of these authors that I'm never going to meet because they're dead, or chances of meeting them are very, very slim to none. But I allow them to influence me with their writings, their works, their videos, and so on. So there's a number of people I can say, like Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn is passed. Bob Proctor. Bob Proctor passed. But I've read their books. Some of these engine, Napoleon Hill, died long time ago. These people are external people that I've allowed them to inspire me. Bill O'Reilly, So there's a number of people that whose books I read and videos I watch as I'm always looking to get the resources of knowledge. Number one. Number two, then around me, I surround myself with people that they've done more or they've achieved greater reaches than I have, and I want to learn from them. So because I was adopted, I don't know who my real father is, and that don't even matter. My adoptive father, my real father who adopted me, what I learned from him wasn't anything intellectual or academic. My father wasn't an entrepreneur. My father wasn't an author. He wasn't a speaker. He was a very quiet guy, but he got up every morning at 5:30 because by the time I got up to go to school, my mom was already packing him lunch and he was out the door. And sometimes I wouldn't see him till 6, 7 o'clock at night. So he put in 12-hour days, 6 days a week because he had to. So I learned from him how you take care of your family. I learned from him no excuses. It didn't matter if it was really, really hot. He still was going to work in the cleaners in Spanish Harlem back in the 70s when there was no air conditioning. He was out there pressing clothes in 80, 90-degree humidity in New York City in the summer. He was doing it after working a full day. I learned from him no excuses. You just get the job done, take care of your family. So whether it's learning from that example of hard work, dedication, commitment to family, or learning from others that again I'll never meet, but have done great things that I'm pursuing, it's been a well balanced life experience and learning lessons that I've been able to acquire and still acquire today from multiple people. In fact, this coming Thursday, I'm going to be one of the speakers at the Texas Business Hall of Fame, and these are all great people from Texas, and I purposely am going to be a sponge learning from all these incredible CEOs. So you have to pursue, you have to recognize who's around you and available. And if nobody's around you and available, then go out there and find somebody. Even if you never meet them, they're littered in the books.
Man, I think that's great because we are not always going to have the example that we want or need. But as you shared, there are people out there who have paved the way through their work, through their writings, and through the things that they have accomplished that we can learn from. And sometimes, learning from those people may put us on a path to do what we do in life because everybody don't have the example. But if
Hmm.
you want more out of life, we can search for those examples. We can learn from them. We can read what they share, and we can listen to the messages that they share with us. So that's always good in regards to what we do and how we show up in life, that we can learn from others who may have that influence on us on what we do for ourselves in life. So that's a great reminder, too, that for those who may not have the example or immediate mentors and guide around them, they can learn from other individuals out there who have shown some form of accomplishment.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. So my next question is, what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
I gotta tell you something. That's another one that we could probably spend an hour on. But I think that we are. I think that the we're not doing enough to highlight two things. Number one, that there are good people, good black men doing good things. I think it's easy if you get caught up with the media, that the media is quicker to portray a black man doing something wrong or doing something that's not really conducive of a positive impact much quicker than they will highlight somebody who is doing something of positive nature. And there's a lot of black men out there doing great things. But unless you are purposely seeking it out, you're not going to find it because it's minimized because it's not sensationalism. It's not what people want to hear about. They want to hear about the negative stuff. So I would say to every black man, a minority, number one, you've got to support your brothers. And what I mean by that is if you have somebody who's doing like Richard, your show right here, right? As soon as we get done here, as soon as you get this, I'm going to promote the heck out of it. That's why I had you on my radio show
Yeah,
because I want to highlight a brother who was highlighting other brothers.
that's right.
I mean, come on. So support each other. And I want to I want to go on a little bit of with your permission, a little bit of a rant.
Yeah, that's that's right. That's right.
I I always encourage folks that the way you can not suppress but trump negativity is by increasing the exposure and the awareness of positivity.
That's right.
And if we just use something as simple as Facebook or Instagram, but let's just say or LinkedIn, if I see somebody doing something positive, I'm going to post about it. I'm going to share somebody else's goodness. I'm not gonna bypass it. But what I see too many times on Facebook is too much of the crap
Yeah,
is was shared, commented, posted on, blah, 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 and it's garbage
yeah,
as opposed to the good stuff that is should be promoted. So if you hear of another black man or another brother who's doing something solid, doesn't have to be that he's doing something on a grand scale, but something positive. That's what you should be resharing. That's what you should be reposting, not the stupid stuff that I see promoted. I think that makes no sense. So I think the black community, the Latino community, the minority community, we do damage to our own self by not highlighting and promoting goodness and doing the exact opposite, highlighting and promoting garbage. We do a terrible job of doing that. Number one. Number two, we got to call out wrong when wrong needs to be called out. We got to call it out. I was watching my son the other day shows me, my older son shows me a video, and within seconds I said, I don't want to hear that. And it was a rap song, and it was just denigrating. It was garbage. It wouldn't even I mean, I like rap if it's good, if it's got a strong message, I like it. I grew up with rap, right? But not if it's gonna be a stupid message that denigrates.
yeah.
So I said to him immediately, I said, "I don't wanna hear that." I said, "Ken, I love you, brother. I love you, my son, but I prefer that you don't hear that junk, and I prefer you don't share it with me. I'm not interested in it. I'm not interested in it." So he realized there and then, I'm not gonna, Dad's not gonna listen to this stuff. I called out wrong when wrong needed to be called out, and I told them why. It's not the beat, it's what they're saying.
Yeah.
They're promoting violence in that video. We can't highlight that. We can't put money in the pockets of others that are doing that. But like I said, it's a long. I can give you a long answer. It's a rant. But my point is, you got to promote the right and criticize the wrong, even if it means you lose friends or family.
Well, and I really appreciate and support the point that you made in regards to highlighting the good. Because if we want to change the narrative, if we want to have a different perspective, we have to play our part. And I love how you put it by when we see others doing good, we support it, we share it, we comment, we like it. Because that's how more positive messages will reach out there to trump, as you mentioned, the negative. Because if we don't share the positive, we're always going to see the negative. And what you see, that's what's going to influence you. That's what's going to influence how you think. Not only how we think, but the perception others will have of us. So I really appreciate that perspective. I believe that something that we have to do intentionally and consciously if we're going to change the perspective of how we are viewed in society. So, man, I thank you for that. And it's a great reminder as well as we go forward in changing the narrative. So, my next question is what change do you want to see in general amongst Black men? And I know what you just shared could be considered change, what we share and what we support. But is there anything else that you think that we need to do in regards to general change?
Uh, I think continuing to call what's wrong is massively what's needed. I think there's more good than people are led to believe that there is. So, like you said earlier, to change the narrative, you've got to take personal responsibility to call out what's wrong when you see something that's wrong. But apart from that, find something that you can contribute to the community in a positive way. Or if you happen to come across somebody else that is doing something that is positive, get on their bandwagon. Sometimes it's not about your bandwagon, it's about somebody else's bandwagon. If you support somebody who might be doing the good that you don't feel you can do yet, or the project or the campaign or whatever it is that you might not feel you've got the courage, maybe, or the ingenuity or the creativity, but you find somebody who does, support them. Get on their bandwagon, because that's one way that you can help change the narrative. You can bring something positive through the efforts of another person, even if it doesn't impact you, rather doesn't benefit you in any way other than as being an unsung hero to somebody. Get behind those that are doing something and promote their goodness. I think that's another thing that we got to stop. And by the way, that takes being selfless. Got to be selfless. Sometimes it's not all about you and your glory. Sometimes it's about allowing somebody to stand on your shoulders. Let your shoulders be the ones that others can stand on for a little while. And one day somebody will allow you to stand on theirs.
I think that's great. And I think within our community at times, that's one of the challenges, to be selfless and help to push others forward, and or even to pull others up and stuff like that. Because if we're going to do it, if we're going to change how things are, how we are perceived, we have to do a lot of the lifting and pushing ourselves if we're going to see those changes that we want. It's not going to, we can't depend on others per se to say, push us forward. We need to get into the habit of pushing each other forward so we can achieve some of the goals, because it's going to take individuals, it's going to take effort from others to achieve big goals. And I think that perspective has to be shared over and over, sometimes for it to become the norm. Because once it becomes the norm, things will start to move how we want to, to achieve some of the things that is we are capable, because innately we have the ability to achieve great things. But to achieve great things, we will need support of others. And I think that's something that we have to do more of as we go forward.
Richard, one of the things I could just add one more point because this is a pinnacle point here. When
Yes.
I'm getting to know someone, and I get a vibe that they are a good person, sincere person. My question, and that doesn't have to happen in hours. I can get a vibe for somebody in a few minutes. You know what? 90% of the times I'll ask them, what's your goal? What's your dream? I want to make sure that I want to find out if they've got one. And then I follow that up with, how can I become your ambassador?
Wow.
How can I help promote that dream? What can I do to further your cause? Or simply, sometimes I'll say, wow, that's a powerful dream. Where could I help?
Yeah.
You see, if we take more time to get to know somebody, and within a few minutes, that person that you're meeting or you're speaking to, it could be a friend, it could be anybody. And you say, so let me ask you something, Richard. What's your game plan? What are your goals? What's your life looking like in the next 5, 10 years? And if they say something positive, it's okay to say, and you should say, well, how can I help be a part of that journey? How can I become your ambassador of goodwill? What could I do to help you? If we did more of that, forget about it.
Oh man, that's real powerful, as simple as it is, because we can do for others a lot more than we think. And sometimes even the encouragement will go a long way, but we can
Mhm.
do more than we think for someone on their journey to do what they want to do to make the impact they want to make. So I appreciate that reminder, because sometimes it's the small things that we forget to do, and sometimes that's what will make the difference, not only for yourself, because then you make a good, build a good relationship with someone who can later help you to achieve your goals. So I really appreciate that reminder. I think it's one that we always need to remember as we go forward to make a difference, with making our difference whilst we help others to make their difference and stuff like that. So I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So my next question, thank you. My next question would be is, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
Well, I think my number one, there's so many of. Let me give you one that I think was very, very pivotal. The day I decided never to go back and get a job, I remember I had been I've had 3 jobs, Rich. 2 I got fired from, and 1 I quit. So I don't have a good resume. I'm not a good employee. But I decided at that point, I was 23 years old, that I wasn't cut out to work for anybody. I wasn't meant to. And if I had stayed as an employee, which is fine because sometimes you got to do what you got to do to take care of obligations and necessities and bills, and that's okay, but it doesn't mean you have to stay there. But I knew early on that I was not meant, I was too gifted, too talented, too much of a free bird to be restricted under somebody else's authority or somebody else's rules or corporate structure. But I did it long enough to figure out what I really want to do in my life and start to develop my skills and sales till I was able to get out of that. But once I made a decision, and this was a pivotal moment, that I was either going to make it or break, I was either going to cruise or lose as an entrepreneur. I've never looked back.
Wow.
I've never looked back. And there's been some times where I've doubted that decision. I say, well, out of my mind, but I just kept going. That was a pivotal moment. And here's the reason why. When you are when you are in a state of an emergency, you go from a sense of urgency to a state of an emergency.
Yeah.
You find out what you're made of. And you develop skills that you never had before. You swim like you've never had to swim in your life. When you go from a sense of urgency. See, you may have to go to the toilet and you feel it. There's a sense of urgency here. I need to find a toilet. But when you go from a sense of urgency finding a toilet to your body says, this is an emergency. You are in a state of an emergency. You're going to go find somewhere to go. You're going to get real creative. You're going to get very ingenuitive real quick, right? Because you go from that sense of urgency to a state of an emergency. You find out what you're made of. But I never would have gotten to those states of emergencies where my character, my creativity had to be accelerated until I made that decision to strike out on my own. That's one of those decisions I look back upon to answer your question among many. That was a turning point in my life when I made a decision. It's going to be, if it's up to me, it's going to be, I'm either going to cruise or I'm going to lose.
That's sometimes what makes us really tap into a part of us that we don't know. That state of emergency, either you're going to do something or you don't. And
Hmm.
that can be definitely a pivotal moment. And for many, and that's how some people make the shift or they pivot. They in a space where now I have to make a decision. And it's either do or die. Am I going to survive or am I going to die? So that for some people can be what helps them to get on the path to help them to achieve beyond what they may have believed in when they just started the journey. But as you said, you weren't cut out to be like an employee because of how creative you were, the things that you were thinking about doing, and you felt restricted. And that sometimes causes some people to step out of certain places because they have the desire to do more and they just feel as if they are confined to someone's limited belief of them or someone idea of what they're capable of doing. So I think that's a great point to share to some of the listeners who may be thinking about what they need to do. They may feel restricted and they may feel limited and stuff like that. And this is not for you listeners to make a decision that you're going to switch and go somewhere else, but it gives you perspective on why you may feel restricted. Maybe you have the desire to do great things. So appreciate that point because all the listeners are different. And some may be wondering, man, why do I feel so restricted in this place? I want to do great, but not really put things in perspective that maybe it's their calling or desire to do something else. And that's why they feel confined. So I really appreciate that. So my next question is, what life lesson have you learned late that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
Well, I tell you that that's another great question. My personal life lesson that certainly could encourage someone is, and I was just sharing this with someone, with another group about a month ago. Trust the system. Now, here's what I mean by that. I don't mean the government. I don't mean because there's certain things you can't control. You can't control you can't control the weather. You can't control what the government's going to do. You can't now. You could have an input. You can make an impact by your actions and what you do, but ultimately, there's certain things you aren't going to control. Okay, so yeah, that's not the system I'm talking about. I'm talking about trust the system that if you get up in the morning and you have a game plan. and you have desire, and you have vision, and you have coaching, and you have mentoring, and you are acquiring the resources for a greater purpose, trust the system that you will see come to pass the things that you are pursuing. You may not see it immediately, but it doesn't mean it's not working. And if there's one knowledge bomb that your listeners hopefully will walk away from when this airs initially, or if somebody hears it 10 years from now, is lack of evidence is not evidence of lack.
Mm.
Lack of evidence is not evidence of lack. Just because you don't see it happening doesn't mean it's not. It just means it's not at the moment. Trust the system. If you are, from a health standpoint, if you're eating right, you're taking care of yourself, trust the system of weight loss and wellness and well-being. Trust it. You don't have to see it every single day in the mirror. If you are pursuing something great of impact, you may not get the pats on the back. You may not get the thank yous. You may not see it, but keep planting those seeds. Trust the system. Have faith that it's working, even if you don't see it working. I've learned that recently. Not
You know,
learned it, I've had it reinforced recently because you got to keep that sometimes reinforced.
and that's important because we're not going to be able to control everything. And
Hmm.
again, that's something that I learned late myself, that not necessarily trust the system, but I've learned late that I can't control the things that I can't control. My responsibility is to control the things that I can control. And the things that I can control are the things that I do each day. I can't even determine how someone is going to respond to how I do things. I don't have no control over that. So the responsibility, as you said, is to do the things that you have control over and trust that those things that you do will work. And that's something that is worth, as you just said, that we remember, because you may think, or we may think that, if I do this, I'm going to get this result. And because I don't see what's happening in that moment, we start to say, you know what, maybe it's not working, because we stop trusting that it will work because of, as you said, lack of evidence and stuff like that. So it's not because you don't see the evidence right now means things are not working how we think it should. So thank you. And I really appreciate that reminder. My next question, my question before my final question is, where can the listeners find you and help support the work that you're doing to make a difference?
Well, the good news is that Jay Maymi isn't hiding anywhere. They can Google my name and they're going to find all of my content, my radio talk show, my videos, my YouTube channel. But if they go to my central hub, thejmaymi.com, thejmaymi, THEJAYMAYMI.com, there they will find all of the links to the radio talk show host, to the radio talk show, to all of my the sales course, my videos, my social media handles, my speaker reel, in case they are looking to have a very entertaining, impacting speaker. I do tons of keynotes. All my content would be found there. Again, they could just Google my name.
Okay, what's that website again? V Jamie?
It's actually the J Mamie, like the J Mamie, THE, and then my name, JAYMAYMI.com.
Okay, all right, man. We'll share it with the listeners so they
Great.
can find you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. But my final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
I think that the impact that I'm striving for is to impact, to influence, to instruct, to inspire, and ultimately improve the lives of others. I think if there's anything that people will can say about me is, if they encounter me, is I've either been inspired by him, instructed by him, influenced by him, certainly impacted, but I'm better off because of the encounter. He brought something that improved my life. And maybe it could be one of my books. It could be a course, it could be a class, it could be a talk, or it could be just a conversation. If I leave behind a footprint in your life positively, then for me, that is the world. That's what I'm looking to do. And I know that's been my assignment. That's my assignment, rather, for being here during this time.
Man, and I think you're doing it, because that's how I came across the work that you're doing. So I know you're already in purpose, on purpose, and making the impact because the work that you have done or are doing have impacted me. And I checked out your work every now and again, just for the reminder. Because
Hmm.
we all, it doesn't matter how much or how motivated you are, you always need to hear from others what they're doing and their perspective and insight and how you can become better as a person. So I thank you for the work that you're doing. And also thank you for being here on the Black Male Impact.
My pleasure, Richard. Anytime, and let me know when the show is airing, and I'll promote it, and I will help you become the success, or the greater success that you already are.
All right, man. I thank you very much, Jay. Man, I appreciate you being here. Thanks, man.
Take care.
All right.